Royal Canadian Air Force's No. 1 Air Division was at the forefront of Canada's aerial commitment supporting NATO in Europe during almost the entirety of the Cold War. As relations between the Western world and the Soviet bloc chilled after 1945, deterring nuclear-armed bombers, defending the North, meeting United Nations commitments in Korea, and the defense of Western Europe all meant that the RCAF was central to Canadian defense. The federal cabinet agreed to contribute RCAF squadrons to an integrated NATO force in February of 1951. What would soon become No. 1 Canadian Air Division would comprise a total of 12 fighter squadrons, organized into 4 wings. Supporting the 4 wings were telecommunications and air traffic control centers, as well as 30 air material base, and ground crew and other staff who served throughout the NATO deployment. It was the biggest fighter force ever assembled by Canada. The division's main role during the 1950s was air defense, which saw Canadian pilots escorting attack and fighter bombers or providing air cover to support bombing raids. The RCAF was also guided by a policy of protecting national autonomy. The Air Force did not want to be subsumed within American, British, or other commands. To ensure the squadrons deployed as planned, they flew a series of leapfrog flights in which the Sabres and ground crew hopped from airstrip to airstrip. The support crews, always one step ahead of the fighters. In 1954, Canada agreed to replace 1 Sabre Interceptor day squadron in each wing with CF-100s, a commitment that broadened the Air Division's role to include all-weather operations. The 1960s brought changes for the RCAF's main aerial commitment to NATO in Europe. The remaining Sabre squadrons were re-equipped with the CF-104 Starfighter, and RCAF pilots began flying nuclear strike and reconnaissance missions. France took increasing control of its own defenses, leading to 2 wing being disbanded. Unification of the Canadian military also saw 3 wing relocated to Canada, and the Air Division reconstituted as No. 1 Canadian Air Group. In 1970, 1 wing was also disbanded, and the group's CF-104 squadrons were based at Baden-Solingen. 2 years later, the RCAF ended its nuclear era with NATO and returned to more conventional attack and reconnaissance roles. The Air Group operated largely unaltered over the next decade, until the arrival of the CF-18 Hornets, which replaced the venerable Starfighters. In 1988, with the Cold War becoming hotter, the Air Group was again reorganized, becoming 1 Canadian Air Division, the form it would take until 1993, when the RCAF ended its European mission to NATO. The Air Division was home to some of the best of the RCAF's personnel, ranging from frontline pilots to various levels of command. Bud White flew Sabres with 427 Squadron as part of 3 Wing, and John Kroll patrolled German skies with 441 Squadron. Owen Philp and Fern Villeneuve both commanded 434 Squadron, and Stocky Edwards headed 2 Wing. Rain Schultz was Chief Operations Officer for 4 Wing, where he assisted with the preparation for the arrival of the CF-104s. Paul Manson served in 2 and 3 Wings, and also at 1 Air Division headquarters as the CF-100 pilot specialist. And Reginald Lane commanded the Air Division from 1966 to 1969, overseeing its move to Lahr, Germany. To maintain its high standard of readiness, the division trained frequently, work that often pit Canadian wings against each other, or fellow NATO pilots. Canada's pilots won numerous air fighting competitions, including the Guinemau Trophy, Royal Flush exercises, and Tiger meets. Aerobatic displays were also popular, with teams formed throughout the Air Force's time in Europe. They were the RCAF's, indeed Canada's, aerial ambassadors, setting a fine example of the professionalism and commitment of Canadian military aviators during the Cold War. In recognition of the Royal Canadian Air Force's contribution to NATO's defense of Western Europe during the Cold War, a commitment that demonstrated the professionalism and versatility of Canada's Air Force, the No. 1 Air Division and its successors was presented with the Belt of Orion Award for Excellence by Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame at ceremonies held in 2023.